Our journey begins. It is actually day 50, July 2024. Day 50. Who would have thought? It doesn't really feel like 50 days since I started, or since we sort of started, but here we are. It is a beautiful morning, 65 degrees, and the stars are out. There's a full moon, but it's pretty much hidden by some clouds. And yeah, the stars are just beautiful. So I was debating whether to make this an actual journal session for our journey begins, or just to make one and sort of summarize what I end up finding later today. But it doesn't really matter. So might as well just record it here. Basically, I'm convinced that to some extent it's going to be narratives that are going to make the big difference in this whole journey. To really start the movement, it's going to be sharing narratives. So I made a huge list of all the different things that we would potentially talk about in the movie. But then somehow I have to be able to tell those in narrative form. So let me go take a look at that huge list here. Pulling that up now, and then, but yeah, it smells like corn and sounds like a summer evening with the crickets chirping. Okay, yeah, we have a huge list. So let's start toward the top. So, probably going to end up making this a raw type video style, but still make it as interesting as possible. I do think and it is going to be what it's going to end up being, is me sitting or standing in front of the background virtual studio and then have the green screen that replaces my background. That way I can tailor the lighting perfectly and all of that. I think at any point trying to get it to work out so that I could go outside, I think that would be just nice, but not practical. And we can do that later. I'm thinking that in terms of the overall timing, I'm not exactly sure whether we're going to want to release this like around or before the election type thing, or after that it has sort of settled. But yeah, so raw in the sense that, well, maybe not. If I do the virtual background, then it wouldn't necessarily be raw style. Like, I'd still edit it. I'd still try to make the lighting look right and all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, it wouldn't really be that per se. And I think it would be like me telling a story. Basically. Yeah, I think for the most part. But it could also be like me being interviewed. I could bring someone in to like ask me interview questions or something like that. Yeah. not sure. So I just don't know how to create narratives that are going to be able to accomplish what we need them to accomplish. Because, as John Vervaeke was saying, really you should not have top-down narrative structures and expect that to change the world or anything. Really, you need to have narratives sort of created from people engaging with practices of meaning. So I guess in to one extent, like, I am sort of engaging with a big practice of meaning, which for me has been this year-long journey to just like absolutely go as hard as I can to try to make a difference. And so from that, there were some narratives. So yeah, I guess it depends how you look at it, because you could say, yeah, from that practice of trying to be meaningful, and that happened before the one summer that I took off during that practice of trying to be meaningful and do something for my self-development. I ended up turning to thinking through how to actually make a difference in the world. And from that, I thought up the ideas of the movement. And so I suppose it's sort of already a story. For one, it's sort of a story about like trying to really find purpose in life, and like actually do something that can make a difference. But then there should be, like, I feel like just telling people, hey, these are my thoughts, that's not going to work. I feel like you really need like true narratives, because otherwise it's just going to be boring. It's going to be like, hey guys, look. And it's partially boring because, I don't know, like it wouldn't necessarily be boring for me, but I think it would probably be boring for most people that do not pay attention to sort of that sort of stuff. But I'm just not sure. Like I know pretty well how all the steps to writing a book. I guess that is one thing that I've learned quite a bit about. Like, I pretty much have a pretty decent knowledge of that. And is a narrative really any different than that? I don't even really exactly know what I'm saying when I say narrative. The best narratives of all time are definitely the Bible. But there's other narratives or ideas or whatever, which is like the idea of money and whatever. So, yeah, it really depends what you're talking about. Maybe I need to outline all the narratives, but like the main narrative would be sort of the idea that we can create the best world possible, or that we should at least try, and sort of go outline the whole choice methodology. But then to help people understand that, like, I understand that quite well. But if I were to try to explain it to someone, it would just sound boring, and like they would be like, yeah, whatever. They wouldn't understand, they wouldn't internalize anything. And I think it's not that the ideas already aren't narratives. It's that they're not expressible in a way that people could really understand. So how do you express ideas so that people can understand them and that they were interested in them and that they capture their imagination and that it changes their lives? I'm obviously, if there's a complete formula for this, it would probably be solved. There probably is not a complete formula. It's probably going to be a matter of just doing my best, seeing what happens. What would doing my best look like in this situation? I'm not exact. I'm pretty decent at telling interesting stories by using imaginative world building. I've done a lot of research about how to write books and stuff, so I understand how to write a story so that it's all of those things. I'm just not sure. For like, I really hesitate to do the thing where I say, okay, well, anyway. Basically, I'm thinking it will be a movie because that's how people engage with things. And then you can divide that into short videos and upload each part of it as a short video and whatnot. But, and that way it's understandable. Like, I could imagine outlining a movie right now that's like an hour and a half long, segmenting it into like 7-minute sections or something like that. And then for each 7-minute section, kind of outlining everything to talk about in that, and then sort of explaining each aspect within 7 minutes. And then like naming each section so that it makes sense, and sort of that would be the explanation. And that, I think that's basically the structure that these will end up being. Except I think instead of me providing an explanation in 7 minutes, it would be sort of a mini story arc in those 7 minutes. Somehow, sort of sharing a story, a narrative way of understanding the idea that I'd be talking about, but in a way that's actually interesting. So the choice methodology, I think I've already talked through that in one of the other days. So I don't know that I necessarily need to talk through that again. I've already sort of written quite a bit about that book as well. So I kind of already have that. I would just need to shorten it into like an actual 7-minute or 10-minute story or whatever. Because the story has to be interesting to the audience. Like it has to be all the things that make, like, so when I was doing research about like how to make a book that is just absolutely amazing. As I'm saying all this stuff, I might have just hit something. So the main idea with the choice book was that it was going to be an overall narrative completely based off of, or completely personalized and based on an interview with every individual. But while that's a really, really good idea, it's simply not really possible given current AI. That book would just be massively boring. But I'm sort of wondering if I could still do this with just a 10-minute section. If I have a bunch of 10-minute sections that it's doing this for, that might be easier to write a personalized story for. Because that's really how you change lives. It's not necessarily writing a story that's universally applicable. I don't know. I feel like I kind of have to start with the universally applicable, explaining the general ideas before diving into personalized stuff. Even for my own sake. I mean, that's the whole point of this stage, is sort of really dialing down to what we're talking about. So in that case, we do want it to be pretty much a story. I think if I can tap into that sort of, because it's very true that pretty much everyone, no matter if they're already religious or not, sometimes if they're religious, they sort of feel this. But they're like seeking for something greater in life, something that actually provides some meaning. And if the movie, if each little narrative is just massively interesting to listen to because it makes you think of like this, of like that sort of thing, that would be good. Like, I'm just wondering if the story would be about a random fictional character, or would it be about me? I'm not so sure. Because like, okay, let me just try either way and see how it sounds. Oh, well, if I'm going to tell my story, how far back am I going to go? And I feel like in 7 minutes, you can't explain your whole life story. You really have to just be able to explain, like, one little part of something. One little story of my life, sort of thing. And if it's fictional, it's possible to do that as well. But yeah, I guess that is it. It would likely be a story about a character doing something. That's how you would explain what the movement is. Like there's other ways that you could do something like that, which would be like I feel like there's something ahead. Oh, it's a little sign. Oof. Stuff gets scary when it's in the dark. So, because like preachers, for example, they sort of tell you, look, this is the way to do it, blah, blah, blah. But even like best preachers or whatever, they will end up telling stories and stuff because that's actually what people listen to. They don't just listen to someone telling them this. So I think I definitely need to take that wisdom and say, yeah, it's not supposed to be an explanation thing. I don't have to answer every single question. The point is to inspire. The point is to give a taste of what things could be like. So, but when it comes to narratives, so like the movie idea was pretty good. It's just a little too grandiose, but it was essentially going to be an argument between current reality and a possible future reality, and I was going to sort of visualize that possible future reality with renderings and whatnot, which I feel like I could still possibly do those renderings for each segment. I just don't think I have time given everything else I'm going to try to do the next month. But the actual narrative of that was going to be the sort of the struggle between, and then you were going to argue components of ideas between the two versions. But given that that's probably not the best way to do it, how else would you both share the ideas of the movement while it being a narrative format? And I think like one way I can imagine pretty simply would be that you would have a story set in the future of someone living through once the world is a better place or whatever, and then that you sort of visualize that person traveling through that place or experiencing some situation in that place. Like that makes sense. But I feel like that we've had that before. Science fiction has given us stories like that before, where people will write little novellas, and they sort of help us to visualize what the world could look like. But I don't feel like that is actually inspiring. I think what's actually inspiring is hearing about someone in the current world. So, but like, obviously, yeah, I don't know. I guess it would just be me sort of sharing how I came up with the different concepts and what I think the concepts mean, and sort of share them as though I think I, I, I think I need to share these concepts with the world, because I think that these concepts, if we followed them, could change everything for all of humanity. And just make it that simple, because that's actually what happened. Whereas, and then sort of in the way that I share that, yeah, I still think that there should be a way to share the ideas. So, like, for example, the choice methodology, the idea that we have a decision. I mean, for me personally, that was a breaking point where I was like, I was still kind of wondering, okay, well, should I actually do anything? But then when you think about it in terms of the choice, that did sort of change everything. Like, now I really never worry about, oh, like, should I just give up entirely? Because I'm like, well, I could give up entirely, but I made the choice to not give up, because I don't know for certain if giving up is the wrong thing to do. I don't know for certain that it's not the wrong thing to do, because it probably is. And yeah. So, but I don't know how inspiring that would be to just tell that story. I feel like it would be more inspiring if I could, like, craft an interesting narrative about someone making a choice like that. Sort of like a parable. Maybe not necessarily set in the future, but yeah, like set in the modern day. Maybe it could be like based off of my own reality. Yeah, maybe that's what we need. Not Yeah, maybe like one or two of the stories could be set in the future. And we could have those once everyone's been interested. But then you'd have like real world type stories. And I would be telling them, yeah, I still have to figure out this angle. But if I'm gonna be like in front of a virtual background doing something, I could set it up like I'm in like a castle or something. Or whatever, and I could like sort of share the story as though I'm from another dimension, sort of sharing some ideas. I mean, yeah, I could go back to that whole alternate reality type of storytelling where, or the original idea that I was having for this, Our Journey Begins, with sort of having it as though I was from another dimension, sort of sharing ideas with people. But I don't really want to like personify something not real. I think it has to be real from the beginning, even if it's a little bit boring. But hopefully I could still make it interesting. I think it is still interesting to see someone who even though my story isn't that exciting, to like see someone who's like actually trying to do all of the good things that people talk about doing all the time. Or trying to figure out a way to bring about that world. I think that is sort of inspiring. But I still don't know if that would be like a global story where like people, it starts to become like a household parable type of thing. Like, probably would not be the case if it was about me. But if it was about like a sort of a fictionalized version of myself that was from like an alternate reality, and I was sort of looking at things metaphorically, that could be interesting. And maybe it's not, maybe the framing is that I would be like, for the purposes of making the story interesting, I would put myself in that frame of mind where what would I say if I was living in an alternate reality to myself? And in that alternate reality, there was something or another. In the alternate reality, I would be a little bit different in being able to see things metaphorically or something like that. Like, and from like a different angle than most people see them. And so then I would share them. Or perhaps I could envision my real life self having a podcast with a version of myself from another metaphorical place, and that version of myself analyzes things metaphorically, or maybe explains how bad their world is, or just talks about the things of life, but then I explain to that person some ideas. I don't know. So, like, the Bible story is set as though it happened in history. That's what the Bible stories are. But, like, the money story, you don't really need a story line. You just need everyone to hold its beliefs that money has value, that this system of currency has value, and that this country actually has these borders, and all of that. But it's not like, well, I mean, in some sense you do have a big storyline for like a country. Like this is how we got here, this is how we set things up. We set things up for these reasons because of this and that. But they're real stories, right? Now, the Bible stories are also probably mostly real. I guess the Bible stories would be a good example because it's not clear that they are 100% Like the stories themselves are like 100% accurate. I think in large part they would tell the story, sort of include some of the facts, but then like sort of make it into an interesting story. And I guess that's sort of what I'm faced with as well. It can't just be necessarily normal life, although sometimes real life stories are interesting. But if you want to have stories that actually capture people's imagination, get them to think way outside of normal reality, really you have to include some sort of allegorical look at things. And like sort of expand the normal reach of the story into something a little bit broader. So I guess in that sense, I think that's probably going to be my best bet. And people understand that. It's not like I would be being dishonest. I would probably be framing it as though it's some sort of different look at something. So maybe I would because if I frame myself as two personifications, as the real me, and then the me that sort of looks at things very interestingly and adds potential other ways of looking at it and stuff, and sort of expands the stories, and it's not entirely factually identical, but it sort of makes an interesting story. And so that way people don't get too confused by what's going on. So yeah, I guess it could be that sort of thing. That way I could still get those interesting stories. Now, yeah, and I think that would allow me the freedom to sort of not have to live inside the box of, like, did that actually happen to me? Or if I look at things like differently, like, oh, maybe that actually happened in my past or something. It wouldn't have to be a story about me, but it could be. It could be like, could be interesting. Could be interesting. I just think anytime the story's about me, then it makes it seem like I am central to whatever's going to happen, and that for some reason I am important to getting things done. When that's not at all what the situation is. So I don't think, in that sense, the story should definitely not be about me. Like, maybe I tell them, and the sort of alternate version of myself tells the story, but maybe the story isn't about me. It's about... But then if it's just a fictional character, is that any better? Because then it's just completely made up. And it's just about some fictional character. So the main ideas that you would want to walk away from when you read these stories or listen to these stories would just be like utter fascination and mind blown and inspired and motivated to go out there and make changes and to join the movement. And I'm just not sure. Because in the Bible stories case, the main characters, I mean, it seems like most of the main characters were real, even if like all the things they did or whatever weren't real. And then because of that, those real life figures have meaning for a lot of people, and they're important. Like obviously Jesus is very important for a lot of people in his like historical thing and everything else. But I wouldn't want the initial founding stories to be about me. I just think that would be boring and uninteresting and not relatable for most people. Now, it could be that it's the personified version of myself, which would be a fictional character, but would be sort of based on me, so that it pulls the directive or the, I don't know. I'm just thinking that like if it's me sitting in front of a virtual background being like, let me tell you the story of when I realized that life has meaning, or something like that. Then it would be like me telling a story about myself, which is kind of the only thing I can do, unless it's an alternate version of myself telling a story about someone else. Maybe like relaying the Bible stories of that alternate version. That would actually be pretty funny. If I relayed the Bible stories of an alternate version of reality, and those, but then that would kind of imply that basically you just make a new religion that's different than Christianity and based on the alternate realities ideas, and that you might be good to go. That would be interesting, but all of this is fine. I feel like I should be able to just be like, think of something and be totally fine, but it's understandable. I mean, it's a big task I'm thinking through. Yeah, definitely a big task. Would I be coming from a place of authority? Most people, or like in general, for your words to have meaning for people, they have to come from a place of something, of like some sort of authority. Like in Jesus' case, he was saying that his words were coming from him because he is the Son of God. So like that was the authority behind his words. And like when you have a president or